Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Texas Book Festival's Literary Lunch Break. I'm Claire Burrows, Deputy Director at the TBF. And today I'm going to be chatting with Maya Lang, author of What We Carry. Full disclosure, Maya and I went to graduate school together, so this is going to be an adoring, gushy conversation. And she's already here. One second. Okay, so while we're waiting for Maya to connect, hi,
Hi,
how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. It's so good to see you. And I'm not going to tell everybody how long it's been since we've seen each other.
We're going to pretend that we're both very young people and it's only been a couple of years.
Yes, definitely. Well, thank you for doing this, and congratulations on your book. I know
Thank
this is
you so much.
What We Carried just came out last week. So how has it been? How's the past week been for you?
You know, on one hand, obviously, to launch a book right now during this time is not at all what I imagined. And so, of course, I feel the constant sort of specter of what this period would have been like. And I think as an author, when you spend years working on a project in solitude, part of what you look forward to is connecting in person with readers and also having all of your friends and family and loved ones around in person, almost like a wedding,
Mm-hmm.
to help make that moment real. On the other hand, I've been really inspired and gratified and have just thought it's amazing to see the literary community and the book world find all of these inventive ways to connect authors and readers. And if you think about it, publishing is so old-fashioned in certain ways. Um, and so to see us do things in this modern, 21st century way is, I think, really wonderful.
Yeah, I would agree. And just to kind of piggyback on that, just a reminder to everyone, support Maya and all these authors that we've had on our Instagram Live. Buy their books at your independent bookstore where you can. And books are a great way to help us get through this time. So, what I will do is I'll read your bio, and then we'll just kind of jump in to have you read a little bit and then a few questions. Um, so, Maya Schombag Lang is the author of What We Carry, a memoir, and The 16th of June, a novel. Hailed as exquisitely precise by the New York Times, What We Carry is a memoir about mothers and daughters, truths and lies, and how to become the next version of ourselves. Lang is the daughter of Indian immigrants and lives outside of New York City. So, I guess first, because I don't have a physical copy of your book, could you hold up your book for people to see the cover? I assume you have
Yeah.
oh, there.
Here.
Sorry. Yeah, it was kind of a little hidden.
I know it's a little low. I should try and put it up a little more.
No, that's fine. And if you would read a short section for us to get started.
Sure, I'd be happy to read just a tiny little bit.
Yeah.
I will tell people who are just tuning in that I wrote What We Carry kind of unexpectedly. I never thought I would write a memoir, especially because I'm a fiction writer. Historically, that's what I've always done with writing. I was in the middle of working on a second novel when my mother, who had been diagnosed with early Alzheimer's, was suddenly in need of emergency care. I brought her home to live with me and became her full-time caretaker while also caring for my young daughter and also trying to further my career as a writer. So I was overwhelmed, and my life changed so drastically overnight. And during that time, I started writing Facebook posts of all things, just as a coping mechanism and an outlet, and also as a way of kind of capturing our time together. And so I would post these little anecdotes about what it meant to be my mother's caretaker. And an editor happened to see those Facebook posts and contacted my agent and said, I think there's a book here. Um, and I said, oh my God, I could never write a memoir. And like that same day, I wrote, I think 70 pages.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how this book came to be. And so what I'm about to read is.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Texas Book Festival's Literary Lunch Break. I'm Claire Burrows, Deputy Director at the TBF. And today I'm going to be chatting with Maya Schonbog Lang, author of What We Carry. Full disclosure, Maya and I went to graduate school together, so this is going to be an adoring, gushy conversation. And she's already here. 1 second. Okay, so while we're waiting for Maya to connect, hi,
Hi,
how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. It's so good to see you. And I'm not going to tell everybody how long it's been since we've seen each other.
We're going to pretend that we're both very young people and it's only been a couple of years.
Yes, definitely. Well, thank you for doing this, and congratulations on your book. I know
Thank
this is
you so much.
What We Carried just came out last week. So how has it been? How's the past week been for you?
On one hand, obviously, to launch a book right now during this time is not at all what I imagined. And so, of course, I feel the constant sort of specter of what this period would have been like. And I think as an author, when you spend years working on a project in solitude, part of what you look forward to is connecting in person with readers and also having all of your friends and family and loved ones around in person, almost like a wedding,
Mm-hmm.
to help make that moment real. On the other hand, I've been really inspired and gratified and have just thought it's amazing to see the literary community and the book world find all of these inventive ways to connect authors and readers. And if you think about it, publishing is so old fashioned in certain ways. Um, and so to see us do things in this modern, 21st century way is, I think, really wonderful.
Yeah, I would agree. And just to kind of piggyback on that, just a reminder to everyone, support Maya and all these authors that we've had on our Instagram live. Buy their books at your independent bookstore where you can. And books are a great way to help us get through this time. So, what I will do is I'll read your bio, and then we'll just kind of jump in to have you read a little bit and then a few questions. Um, so, Maya Schonbog Lang is the author of What We Carry, a memoir, and The 16th of June, a novel. Hailed as exquisitely precise by the New York Times, What We Carry is a memoir about mothers and daughters, truths and lies, and how to become the next version of ourselves. Lang is the daughter of Indian immigrants and lives outside of New York City. So, I guess first, because I don't have a physical copy of your book, could you hold up your book for people to see the cover? I assume you have
Yeah.
oh, there.
Here.
Sorry. Yeah, it was kind of a little hidden.
I know it's a little low. I should try and put it up a little more.
No, that's fine. And if you would read a short section for us to get started.
Sure, I'd be happy to read just a tiny little bit.
Yeah.
I will tell people who are just tuning in that I wrote What We Carry kind of unexpectedly. I never thought I would write a memoir, especially because I'm a fiction writer. Historically, that's what I've always done with writing. I was in the middle of working on a second novel when my mother, who had been diagnosed with early Alzheimer's, was suddenly in need of emergency care. I brought her home to live with me and became her full-time caretaker while also caring for my young daughter and also trying to further my career as a writer. So I was overwhelmed, and my life changed so drastically overnight. And during that time, I started writing Facebook posts of all things, just as a coping mechanism and an outlet, and also as a way of kind of capturing our time together. And so I would post these little anecdotes about what it meant to be my mother's caretaker. And an editor happened to see those Facebook posts and contacted my agent and said, I think there's a book here. And I said, oh my God, I could never write a memoir. And like that same day, I wrote, I think 70 pages. So that's how this book came to be. And so what I'm about to read is just one of these very short vignettes about my mom. One morning, my mother makes herself a cup of tea. I am ecstatic. After weeks of showing her how, weeks during which I'm not sure she retains a thing, weeks during which I wonder why I bother, watching her finally do it is as jubilant a moment as watching my daughter take her first steps. The episode also drives home our reality. You made yourself tea, I crow. I did, she replies blankly. She doesn't remember making it, can't say how the still warm mug came to be in her hands. The accomplishment marks a ceiling in an ever-shrinking space. A woman who once saved lives can now do no more than make tea. It's bittersweet, like watching sandcastles on the shore. All that work speaks to its own pending erasure. The episode with the tea helps me grasp my situation. I can't fathom my mother's disease, can't wrap my mind around what it and our living arrangement mean, but a small anecdote involving tea is manageable. It gives me a story, a way to explain the ineffable. It gives me a few lines when the rest of the tale is out of reach. Alzheimer's is devastating because it annihilates one's story. It vacuums it up. Even the name feels greedy to me. What gets me most about Alzheimer's is the apostrophe, that possessive little hook. It drags your loved one away from you. My mother no longer belongs to me. She belongs to her illness. My time with her is a way of countering that apostrophe. The episode with the tea, in giving me a story, allows me to stake a claim on her. The magnitude of the ocean can be overwhelming, but a sandcastle, however fleetingly, defies that power. Its beauty is more poignant for its brevity. I cannot comprehend what is coming for my mother, the tidal wave of loss, but in the meantime, we have this together, tea in the kitchen. Even if she does not remember it, I will. It is enough to get me through the day and the next.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And I found myself thinking about sending my son to go get our dog to be quiet, working from home. I find myself like thinking about that story towards the end when you bring the electric tea kettle to your mother's room, and I was like, the tea just means so much to the relationship. Thank you. I love that. So I've obviously read it, and everyone knows what it's about. Can you discuss just the significance of the title and what that means to you and why you chose that title?
Yeah, well, first I'll tell you a little bit of kind of a funny background story about the title, because sometimes I think hearing from authors can be interesting to know these behind the scenes things that happen in publishing. So originally the title for this book was The Woman in the River. And that's because the whole memoir is kind of framed around this myth that my mother tells me about a woman in a river. It's like this Indian story that's quite perplexing. So we originally thought we'd call it The Woman in the River. And it turns out, there are all these books, especially in the past kind of 2 years, that are like the woman / girl in the something, like in the window, the girl on the train, in the cabin. There have been like all kinds of female full preposition place. So we replicate that formula. So, especially because this is not like a suspense thriller. Anyway, so then we started thinking about what is this book really about? And part of what I realized is that it's about the weight that women shoulder um, as mothers, as daughters, and I think just as people in family structures and relationships who do so much invisible labor. You know, often so much of what we do at the end of the day, we might feel like we can't actually point to what we did, and yet we're exhausted. And it's because,
Mm-hmm.
at least for me, at the end of a day of caring for my mother, caring for my daughter, um, it sort of feels like you're an on demand therapist, cook, psychiatrist, you know, life coach, assistant, nurse. So you're doing all of these things, and that can be consuming. And part of it was that I wanted to recognize that weight of what we carry. And then it was about the stories that we carry around in our heads that we don't even necessarily realize we have in our heads. And that can be from the sort of myth making that takes place in families where you get told in your family, oh, your brother is the smart one, and you're the artsy one, or you're the shy one. You know, whatever it is, these narratives form without us even recognizing it. And the power of stories is that they really shape us. When we have these stories in our heads about who we might be, even if those stories are completely false, they're powerful. And they can really affect our decisions and how we map out our lives. Um, so that's kind of how the title came to be.
Yeah, I love it. And you're right. I love that it is two things like what we carry day to day, but then kind of like this inherited weight, whether it's through stories. And that kind of leads to my next question is, and you kind of alluded to this, is the mythology of motherhood, right? Like we do often have this idea that good mothers, we're good because we sacrifice everything. And with Mother's Day kind of around the corner and just, I guess on brand, how can we rethink culture's relationship with mothers? And I think you do that in this book to say, like, I mean, with this story, this Indian story, that's not, right, necessarily what makes us a good mother.
Yeah, so, interestingly, my mother had always told sort of the story of her own life, especially her story of how, her sort of narrative of who she was as a mother. She had always shaped that through the lens of sacrifice. So
Mm-hmm.
she was an immigrant. She had come to this country. She had sacrificed everything for me and my brother. And during her dementia, part of what happens in dementia is that that kind of armor falls away because my mother could no longer remember those stories. So the truth came out. And when I learned about who she really was and the choices she had actually made, I saw that it was sort of like seeing the wizard behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz. I mean, I saw that so much of it was illusions and false narrative. And it was quite astonishing to learn about her actual self. So part of what that made me realize is that this kind of, and different cultures do it in different ways. The way we have the sort of superhero mom in America, the sacrificial mom in various Asian cultures, it comes up in different forms. But part of what I really started thinking about is what is the inheritance of sacrifice, and how does that make our children and specifically our daughters feel? So whenever my mother would say to me, I sacrificed everything for you, I never felt more loved as a result. I felt guilty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thinking about Mother's Day, you know, part of what I would say is that I have learned in my own life two things. One, I'm a much better mother to my daughter when I prioritize myself and take care of myself partly because I bring a much healthier person to the table, but also because in thinking about my daughter's future, I don't ever want her to sacrifice herself. I want her to choose herself every single time. And there's no way that she can do that unless she sees me do that. And, I think with Mother's Day approaching, part of what bothers me about Mother's Day, to be perfectly blunt about it, is that I think we have this notion in our heads that self-care equates with flowers or a glass of wine or these kinds of gestures. I think self-care is something much more vital, where we're not giving ourselves a brownie or a massage. True self-care, I think, is reaching for your own oxygen mask first before you tend to the people around you. And it's recognizing that that act is not a luxury and that oxygen is a necessity. So to feed yourself, to take care of yourself, that is not some indulgence. That is healthy and that is vital. And that is what we should do. Not only to be better mothers for our children, but also because we deserve it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that so much, and it gives me chills. That's great. And I think along those lines too. So of course you talk about motherhood. You also have some really big stories in this memoir. Story, your parents or your mother specifically, immigration, gender, but Alzheimer's is of course a big topic here, and caring for someone with Alzheimer's. And I would love what would you say to someone who is a caregiver for someone with dementia and specifically Alzheimer's? Because I think that kind of falls along with this same topic of like take care of yourself, but also taking care of this very important person.
So to any caregiver out there who has somehow magically found the time to tune in and listen to this, I just want to say that I see you and I know how that feels. And if you have caregiving in your past, if you've been in that club, we know what it's like to be in that space and to be in that juncture. And my God, it is so hard. I mean, caregiver burnout is very real. And you really give yourself over to the other person in caregiving. And sometimes that yields moments of beauty and connection. I wouldn't trade my time caring for my mother for anything. It was so incredibly important for us. But the nature of it can be overwhelming, and it's a lot. And every day can be such a roller coaster of emotions and physical acts. So I know what that space is like. And, the one thing I would say is that I think there are the challenges that we take on in life. And then there are the challenges that get foisted upon us. And I think it's the latter. I mean, this is part of what we're seeing in this pandemic, right? Like, crisis is not something you ever choose, but it does make you stronger and make you more resilient, and it yields insights. Part of what I say in the book is that, like, no lump of coal would ever choose the process of becoming a diamond, because it's not fun when you're in that space of time and pressure and difficulty. That's not a fun place to hang out, especially because it lasts a long time and you don't know when it's going to end. But you don't get to the place of strength and clarity and brilliance. You don't get to be the next version of yourself without succumbing and submitting to those challenges.
Yeah. So speaking of, I guess maybe on the lighter note, how is mothering during quarantine for you?
So yeah, my daughter is upstairs right now on various Google Hangouts, and I'm grateful that, especially being here in New York, I live 10 miles outside of Manhattan. And so to be this close to the epicenter and to know, I have friends who work in the hospitals who tell stories about what they're seeing. So I'm grateful that my problems are what they are, and that the kind of daily aggravations or challenges of dealing with like homeschooling and quarantining, you know, if that's all I have to complain about, that's really good. And my mother is in an assisted living facility. So that has also, you know, just been difficult in the sense of having no control and feeling helpless. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, because that's, you know, they've had cases in the facility. Um, and so that's just difficult to know that she's there and there's nothing I can do. Um, but I think part of what I've just come to realize is that the sort of loss of control, you know, the way I perceive it, truthfully, we never really have control over things in life. We just have the illusion of control. Uh,
Mhm.
and so I think you just have to kind of recognize that worrying is not going to accomplish anything. And you just have to kind of trust and hope for the best.
Yeah, yeah. Um, let's see. I guess I have one more kind of question, and I feel like this is a common question about memoirs, but kind of circling back to the process is how do you write about people that are still, that are gonna read your book? Frankly, like one day Zoe will read it, and your brother, and I think you do it so respectfully yet honestly, which is very admirable. So how is that process?
Well, thank you, first of all. Yeah, I think, you know, during the writing process itself, when you're first going about it, it's kind of like that moment of strapping yourself into a roller coaster where you feel terror, but you think, okay, I'm just going to do this. And, um, you know, I think if I had thought too much ahead of time about it, it would have been paralyzing and I wouldn't have written a word. So at first, you just have to kind of dupe yourself and think like, okay, I'm just going to write it and maybe no one will read it. And then once it was clear, you know, once the book deal happened and it was clear that this was going to be published, the first thing I did was share the manuscript with my brother, and, you know, with a couple of other people who are central characters in the story, just to say, I want to make sure that you're okay with this in the world. Part of what I realized is that I think the character that I'm hardest on in the story, I think, is me. And so because I think I gave myself the hardest time, um, you know, part of me thought, even though I've been radically honest in writing this, and even though the book comes from a very deep, raw place, um, it's really about my own difficulties and my own struggles and my own questions and everything I'm grappling with. So I wasn't too worried about anyone. I didn't really anticipate anyone complaining about how I had portrayed them.
Yeah, yeah. Great. Well, I think kind of my last two questions for people who are watching is what memoirs would you recommend for people? I love a good memoir, and this is an amazing memoir. I think, a great memoir, there's so much like specificity to your story, but also so many things that other people can take away. And so, yeah, what memoirs would you recommend?
Yeah, well, I would also love to hear memoirs that you've read that you really, because I know you're reading all the time through the Texas Book Festival. And
Mhm.
for me, I mean, two memoirs just recently that I loved and also that kind of shaped this book. One is Good Talk by Mira Jacob.
So good. Oh, I love it. Yes.
It's so good and it's also so different. I mean, it's very hard to say, you know, it's a graphic memoir. It's very hard to say like how she accomplishes so much
Hmm.
through comic book form, but she evokes so much and gets you thinking about so much. Um, and especially as the daughter of Indian immigrants, there was just this kind of feeling of like, oh, you're allowed to talk about this stuff. You're allowed to go there and not just be thinking about white audiences and white readers. You're allowed to kind of talk about experiences that are very specific to your culture. Um, so that memoir definitely, you know, sort of, I think, opened up space for me to think about how to write my story. And then Kiese Layman's Heavy, um, you know, he and Mira, I am, Facebook friends with, and part of what I would see their journey of writing their books was, just all these questions that come up in how do you really be truthful to your story and faithful to your story and capture your culture and your community and your experience. So both of those cultures, yes, Heavy was amazing. I see someone commented, I agree. It was just written with so much heart and uh, sincerity, in a way that moved me powerfully.
Yeah. Well, I would agree with both of those wholeheartedly. I would, so my recommendations would be two from last year. Saeed Jones's How We Fight for Our Lives was good. It's a tough book and it's really good. And then also Sarah Broom's Yellow House. I mean, it was just the research in that was phenomenal on New Orleans. So those are my two memoir suggestions.
Those are great. I haven't read Yellow House yet. Um, or
It's
Yellow,
good.
sorry, yes.
Yeah, yeah, you kind of have to dig into it. Like there's a lot of research, there's a lot of history. It's so great. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
love.
what are you reading now outside of memoirs?
So
Or do
right
you even have time to
now, I try. Right now, I'm reading Olive again by Elizabeth Strout, the follow-up to Olive Kitteridge. And I had put off reading it for so long because I loved Olive Kitteridge so much, and I was really worried it was going to disappoint. It's so good. And every night I've actually been reading it slow on purpose because especially during the quarantine, to have a book that just transports you is such a good feeling. And I'm getting that from the book where I'm able to be transported into Maine and to dwell in the space that she creates. So, yeah, I've been loving that book.
Yeah, I have not read it, so I will. Well, I think we're just about out of time. So everybody, I know some people joined towards the end. We're talking to Maya Lang and about her book, What We Carry. Please go get it. And I think some of my favorite lines and are like choosing ourselves. And I think especially, well, at all times, whether you're a mother or a caregiver or just a person, caring for ourselves and choosing ourselves is so important. And Maya's memoir is a great reminder of that. So thank you, Maya, so much. This will be available, so everyone, if you missed the whole thing, you can watch it again and go buy some books. So thank you, Maya.
Thank you so much, Claire. Thank you to the Texas Book Festival. You guys do amazing work, and thank you for your support of authors during this time.
All right, bye.